Are we live already? Oh, we
We
are
are
live now.
live. We are live, Carol, and we finally cracked it. Well, we've been
Yay!
having fun and games. We have,
I
haven't
know.
we?
Third time lucky. Third time
Yeah,
lucky.
exactly. So tech is enough to throw any of us off, I think. So, so without further ado, let me introduce you to Carol Uri. And have I said that name wrong? Uh,
No,
oh,
perfect. You're
do you
probably one
know
of
what?
the few that actually say it correctly. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's something because I'm terrible with words, really, really bad. But hey,
Normally people say Uri, and it's like,
yeah.
no, it's Uri. It's Uri.
Well, that's my southern side coming back from all those years ago. So it's like Bath and
Oh,
grass, and
Bath and
everybody
Bath
takes the
and Bath.
mickey out of the way I say things. So, and that's from being down south for years. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but now I'm in sunny Lincolnshire, not that far from you, and we met, didn't we, and had a lovely catch up, which was really nice to meet somebody that you've met through networking
Yeah,
online.
definitely.
And yeah, it's been great to meet you. So you've got so much to say about the brain and the mindset and alcohol and how to stop drinking alcohol. I must admit, I'm a lot better these days because simply because it upsets my stomach and it really irritates me
Mm.
that I can't drink now. But it's probably just as well because it's not really that good for us over the long term. So without
Mm.
further ado, Carol, introduce yourself and tell everybody whatever you like. I shall leave you to it, and I might just interrupt occasionally. Or wait, man, I want to say something here.
I'm hoping this is just going to be a conversation because I've everything's in here really. So it'll be testing my mindset. Yeah, so I am an alcohol control coach. I used to be the alcohol free coach, but what I've found is people get really fearful when they think about not having their regular drink.
Mm,
I certainly did. And going back to just a little bit about my story is
yeah,
I used alcohol really to de-stress at the end of the day. Well, actually, going back even further, my son is coming up for 23. When he was born, I got a 6-year-old daughter, Lucy, and when Nathan was born, something wasn't quite right. Everybody was saying everything's fine, but I just knew as a mum something wasn't quite right. And eventually, at the age of probably 5, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which is no longer a thing. It's more autistic spectrum disorder now, and
right,
ADHD. So there was a lot of stress around school and education, and his behaviour was really challenging. And he's a very, very bright boy. He's always been extremely bright. Now, the way I dealt with it was I hit the bottle basically. Wine
yeah,
was my thing. So that's how it started out. And that was, as I say, probably, yeah, not quite 20 years ago. But it was a gradual process. And I think that's the key thing really, Nicola, is it is a gradual process. I mean, it's great for all those people out there that can just take it or leave it. I could never take it or leave it, sadly. If I had one, I had to have the whole bottle. And then towards the end, before I decided to give up, I was drinking probably a bottle and a half, almost 2 bottles, and a couple of beers too. So
right.
that sort of progression happened
Mm.
over, yeah, like 17, 18 years.
So
Yeah.
when I was at the height of my working, I would often see it as a treat when I came home to have a glass,
Mm,
and my husband and I would perhaps share a bottle. I wouldn't say we were particularly bad, but it certainly affects you. It affects how you feel in the morning, doesn't it? And it affects your functioning, your performance.
mm.
And then I started to be poorly, and so we've had to cut it back. And actually, I'm really relieved now. If I have just one glass now, I feel dreadful. So, and I get all sorts of reactions, and I think that's something to do with going through the menopause, which we often don't talk about. I think the symptoms get a lot
Mm,
worse. Um,
mm,
but I think recognizing that you're on that slippery slope is really important, don't you?
definitely. definitely. I didn't see it being an issue really until probably my first marriage split up. I
Mhm.
was probably drinking 2 or 3 bottles a week. My first husband wasn't a big wine drinker, and I just used it just to drown my sorrows because I was just so stressed.
Yeah,
And my hubby, I worked from home then, so I used to take the kids to school, work from home, and then pick the kids up from school, and I used to have to deal with all the educational bit right the way through Nathan's schooling. And my husband, he's a good dad. He went out to work, did his thing, came home, but never really got to grips on Nathan, and all the challenges, because I think I was dealing with a lot. He'd come to the big appointments to see the psychologist and things, but all the other stuff. And I just sort of kept pushing it down, pushing it down, pushing it down. And I think I used, like a lot of people use, alcohol to self medicate,
mm,
because I just could not deal with my emotions, because I blamed myself for years and years and years. I thought I'd done something while Nathan was in the womb, and it was my fault that he was challenged in this way. Now, obviously, I don't believe that anymore. But
okay.
during that time, I was really stressed. I was quite unhappy in my marriage, which probably made me drink even more. But we sadly split up when Nathan was about 8, I think, and Lucy was about 13, 14. Now, there was nobody. I had to get a full-time job. I was only working part-time, so I found myself a full-time job. Didn't have anywhere to live. I used to be a landlady, interestingly, because, of course, that's where booze was. So, I stayed in the pub upstairs for about 4 or 5 months. Found the place I was working had an advertisement going for, a housing manager. I wasn't qualified at all. I had to have a degree, and I didn't have a degree, but I thought, "You know what? I'm just gonna go for it." And I actually got the job. So I got a really good job, which enabled me to rent. The kids wanted to spend half their time with their dad and half with me. We lived in the same village, and it was all fine. But when the kids were at their dad's, I used to really go hell for leather on the booze. I was down the pub most nights, drinking when I got back from the pub. Met my husband, who I'm married to now, Clive, and our whole social life was around the pub. He wasn't a massive big drinker, he was a beer drinker. But yeah, I think that's when really slippery slope started. And my job that I got was super stressful. Lots of meetings, lots of deadlines, lots of
Yeah,
I had a boss above me who was a bit of a hard taskmaster, I would say. And it was hard. I was going into work at, 7:30, 8, and not getting back till sort of 6 o'clock at night, and then having the kids to sort out when they was with me.
it is
So
hard,
yeah,
isn't it? Yeah, and I kind of
yeah,
think
it was really tough.
and your story about, splitting up from your husband and and then sort of building a social life around booze. Actually, I kind of understand that because I kind of, when I split up, I kind of almost rebelled because I hadn't gone out and partied wild when I was 18.
Mm,
And I look back now and I cringe for my poor children because they had babysitters and what have you. And remarkably, they've turned out extremely well considering how I would go out partying at night, and I can remember being told about my performance at work, and quite rightly so. But at that time, it was my way of coping with the fact that I was getting divorced and it hadn't been a
mm,
pleasant experience. And I think we all find our way of coping through that. And so, yeah, I was going out to nightclubs and such. I had a great party life for a little while until I met Ronald, my husband. And thank goodness he came along. That's all I can say, because he's very much a stabilizing force and has given us so much as a person. So, totally get where you're coming from and why it happens.
mm. Yeah, it's really easy to slip into that. And it's a big grey area, because, like, people, they'll say in conversations, people who know me from the village, because you always think your drinking's okay because you hang around people that drink the same as you do.
Yeah.
So you never really question your drinking. And it's only since I stopped that people have said to me, "I didn't realise you were an alcoholic, Carol." Now, that used to really bristle me. I used to get like, I didn't get defensive, but I would like, well, I wouldn't call myself an alcoholic. But then I used to Google, am I an alcoholic? And because I didn't tick all the boxes, but I was, functioning well, although, like you said, the following morning, you don't perform well at work. You've got a foggy head. My tummy used to be really nauseous. I'd get up some
Yeah.
mornings after going to bed, after drinking a bottle and a half of wine. And I'd get up in the morning because my body was still processing that alcohol. I'd feel quite woozy still sometimes, not drunk, but a little bit lightheaded. And I used to think, crumbs, if anybody stopped me and breathalyzed me, would I have been over? Because my mornings, I remember it was always on a Thursday morning. It's interesting, Nicola, because I used to try my best after a heavy weekend drinking. He says to himself, right, that's it. I am not drinking until Friday. And Monday I'd be hungover when I got in from work, so I wouldn't want anything. Tuesday I'd be biting my nails, thinking I really could do with a chill out and I really could do with a wine. And then by Wednesday I'd cave in. And this was just a regular routine for me. So Thursday mornings going into work, I always felt like death warmed up. I always felt awful, and I'd be eating all the biscuits in the biscuit tin. I'd be eating sandwiches. I'd be eating anything I can get my hands on, trying to taper down my nauseous tummy.
Yeah.
And I think I tried for over a decade to try and change my behaviour. And that's why I want to talk really about mindset, is because changing your behaviour is not the answer. It is not the answer. It's all to do with our subconscious. Our subconscious mind
Yeah.
really runs our life. 90% of our emotions, what we think, what we do, what we believe about ourselves is all hidden in our subconscious mind. We have, I mean, it depends what study you look at, but it says we have 11 million thoughts of data per second come into our brains because of our environment. Now, majority of that we filter out. It's like me, we're sat on a chair now. You're not consciously thinking about your bottom sitting on the chair until I mention it. So it's
Yeah.
not until you bring that unconscious thinking into your conscious that you become aware of it. I mean, my computer's slightly buzzing. I can hear it. Or the birds might be singing. Or there's a car going by. We block all those subconscious things out.
Mm.
And when we're drinking, let me rewind. A lot of people take on board a lot of things subconsciously. We all know about this subliminal stuff and like
Yeah.
shops playing things when we're shopping and where they position things. It's all on psychology. I've lost my train of thought now. But when we are, our environment. So people will say to me, Carol, is it in your genes? Now sometimes we are predisposed genetically
Right.
to be habitual in our behaviors. But a lot of it, there's no addictive gene. There's no specific gene that scientists have said that is the addictive gene.
Right.
A lot
Okay.
of it is environmental because it's how we've been brought up and how we've seen alcohol often. And if we've seen our parents have fun around alcohol, or alcohol's always been this good thing to have, or maybe we've been brought up in an environment where alcohol's been used excessively and we've not had a good background around alcohol with our parents or a family member. But alcohol is subconsciously, it's just being fed into our psyche like adverts. How many
Well, I was going to
adverts do
say,
you see? Television programs, how many
yeah.
television programs? They open the fridge, grab a bottle of beer, pour themselves a glass of wine. It's constantly in our brains like memes. In fact, I went to Walker's, it's a bookshop which sells cards in Stamford, where I'm from. and I took a photograph. I put it on Instagram actually, and the amount of I didn't want a card with wine on it for a lady. I wanted a nice card. Practically every single card had a meme on it with alcohol, either holding a glass, a bottle, or, I like wine. Sometimes I add it to the food, like I use it for cooking. You've heard all those memes. So we are bombarded constantly with thoughts, and they're all positive thoughts that the media portray and the drinks industry portray, because it's an acceptable, because it is a drug. It is a mind altering drug, because that's why we have it, because it, you know, changes how we think about things. It dampens down our emotions.
It
So
does,
yeah.
doesn't it? It kind of relaxes you, it lets your
Mhm.
inhibitions go.
Yeah.
Woe behold if you post something at that point in time, because it wouldn't be something you would filter properly. And yeah, it's the after effects, isn't it? And it's also when you get to that stage where you're um blacking out, you don't know what you did. I think
Mm,
that even more worrying. And luckily,
yeah.
I've never had that happen, but it's something that
Mm,
must be quite frightening as well if when you wake up the next day and you can't remember anything. But as you say, you're
mm.
surrounded by it all the time. If you say you go out with a group of people and you say you don't drink, they look at you gone out, really, don't they?
They do. It's becoming a little bit more acceptable, I think, now, and a lot of the places are getting non-alcoholic alternatives. It was our 10th wedding anniversary, I think last week or week before. We went out for a lovely meal in Stamford, and I just thought, oh, it'd be really nice just to have something different. I love fizzy water, I love soda water, but I just thought, wouldn't it be nice if they had like a sparkling no secco or something, which is
Yeah,
really nice, and I don't have it very often. And I just asked and just said, "Oh, what non-alcoholic alternatives have you got?" Anyway, she said to me, "Oh, we've got Beck's Blue." I said, "Is that it?" She said, "Yeah, and this is a really nice restaurant." And I just thought, there's still a lot of people need educating. Not everybody wants to drink an alternative, and I completely get that. I
yeah.
have an alternative. I've been shopping today. I've been fancying something for a few weeks, something really different, and I've been shopping today. And in Sainsbury's, I had some kombucha, ginger. I love ginger kombucha. So I bought 4 little cans of that, put it in the fridge, and they might be there for several weeks, and I'll just have the alternative. But going back to you said something. Oh, we were talking about blackouts. Blackouts are really interesting because there's two. When we think about blackouts, we think about being completely unconscious. I remember my sister being shoved in the door on her 18th birthday. Somebody had been plying her with brandy all night. She was completely off her face. And I sat
Hmm.
up all night watching her because I was scared to death she was going to vomit and die. She was in such a state, and she
Yeah,
completely blacked out. But there's a blackout where you're actually walking, talking, and that is, you said you can't remember, and that's to do with our hippocampus, because our hippocampus in our brain is to do with our memory.
right.
So it's really like, for all those who remember the cassette players, when you used to press play, I used to record the top 40 on a Sunday afternoon when I was young. I
Yeah,
used to
so did
wait
I.
till we stopped talking and then press to get the song and
Yeah,
then press quick. Well, our hippocampus is affected by alcohol, and what happens is we're on play mode, and then as soon as we start drinking and we've had too much to drink and it's affected our hippocampus, the stop button gets pressed. So we can't remember. And
yeah.
that can be quite scary. I mean, I've
Mm.
got myself into some real predicaments around alcohol. I've posted, done drunk texting, upset people. I mean, I am the most placid, easygoing, laid back person you'd ever want to meet. But certain wines used to get me quite obnoxious. I'd be quite argumentative, which is just not me at all. So it changes the chemistry in our brain. It
Yeah,
really does change the way our personality often. I mean, I get the relaxing bit. I completely get that, because that's why we all drink, isn't it? We want that
Yeah,
chill, and we do get that because it is a numbing agent. It numbs our yucky feelings or emotions, but also it numbs the good as well as the bad. But we want that
absolutely.
chill, and we get that chill for about 20 minutes. So we get
Mm,
that relief. But then what happens is our brain recognizes that, because our body treats it as a toxin, because it is a toxin to our body. It's actually a class 1 carcinogen. And not a lot of people realize that. It's,
no,
directly linked with 7 different cancers.
didn't
And
know
the World
that.
Health People don't know, and that's not to scare people, but my job is, as an alcohol control coach, is to educate people around alcohol, because I'm not one. I don't want to demonize it. I don't want to say you shouldn't drink it. What I want to say to people is, look at the research. The World Health Organization has said that no amount of alcohol is safe. And if you do your research, then you can choose. If you want to drink moderately and you want to have a few drinks, they say up to 14 units. Well, if you have a large glass of, say, 14% wine, that's 3 units in a 250 ml. So a unit is
Mm,
not one glass. A unit is 8 grams of alcohol, which is like 100 milligrams, milliliters. So if you think of the 125 glasses, the tiny little ones in the 70s and 80s,
yeah,
less than that is 1 unit on
yeah,
wine, and it depends on the volume, the ABV.
and
So if you have one large glass of wine, that's 3
yeah,
units, because it's 9 units-ish in a bottle of wine.
and that's what most people have. And when you go into pubs, so you can't even really get
Yeah.
asked. Now you don't get a small, which is what
Mhm.
we used to get. The days of tower wine and blue
Mm.
Liebfromage and
Yeah,
all of
yeah,
that. You don't
yeah.
really see those now, do you?
No, no,
And
you don't.
and also things have changed so much, because if you think back, and we're showing our age here, but we didn't used to have supermarkets when we were like in our early 20s,
No.
or they were just coming in probably. And it wasn't until we got supermarkets and all the different array of wines did we
Mm.
really start buying into that wine ethos as well, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
And beer as well. And I did when I first got married and left home. I was buying my like meat from the butchers, going to the bakers, going to all the different shops, and in some respects, I wish we were doing that again now. It's convenience,
Yeah,
isn't it? But I'm
yeah.
digressing. But it's just an observation that makes it much easier just to pick it up.
It
And
does. It's sitting right in front of your face. You go into most supermarkets, we've got Sainsbury's and Morrisons and Waitrose, and as soon as you walk into Sainsbury's, without a doubt, you will get a ton of beer. Summer's coming, or spring, nice weather, or a ton of wine. It's at the end of each aisle in the fridges, often in the cold section. Same in Morrison's. It's in the atrium area. When you walk into Morrison's, there's usually a long line of something that's on special offer, and you can guarantee there's either beer, wine, alcohol there. As I say, that's fine. If you want to drink, then it's not an issue, but it's just understanding. And I want to sort of, say to people, if you really do want to cut back, you can cut back. You can look at alternatives as well. But the behavioural, I mentioned and touched on that earlier, a lot of traditional routes around changing your relationship with alcohol is just changing your behaviour. Now I've got a podcast called Kicking Habits, and I've done lots of different things around mindset. So anybody who's watching, if you go to Apple or Spotify, Amazon Music, look up Kicking Habits, and you'll be able to listen to what I've been talking about around mindset. And I did an episode last week, I think it was, around behavior. Now, behavior doesn't last. It's like willpower, isn't it? Our
yeah,
willpower when we tried to use willpower, I tried willpower for well over a decade, more even, and I would last a couple of days. If I was really lucky, I might get through most of a dry January or a sober October. I think I only did it once, and it nearly absolutely killed me. But changing our behaviour and using willpower, it's like, do you remember that Duracell bunny that used to hop around and used to put cheap batteries in one
Yeah.
and Duracell batteries in the other? Willpower's like a battery. It runs down, and we've got something called decision fatigue. Now, I work with professional women around alcohol because a lot of professional women do come home from work or have been in their home office all day and go for a G&T or a wine. It's a regular thing. Our brain gets used to that hit and that dopamine hit. But trying to change our behavior and use our willpower after we've made a ton of decisions at work, from putting your feet on the ground, getting out of bed in the morning, you are subconsciously making millions and millions of different decisions, and you're worn out by the end of the day. So all you want
Yeah.
to do is chill, and that willpower is just not there. It might be there for a week, maybe a couple of weeks. With me, it lasted 2 days. But willpower doesn't work, and it's purely because of the decisions we've been making all day. Our brain gets really tired, and it's the same with, you could say it's the same with sugar and chocolate. I was a bit of a chocolate fiend at sort of 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. I'd be like, I want a bit of chocolate. And I love the dark 70% chocolate. I really love it.
Well, at
And
least
I
that's
got in
something.
I got into a
Yeah.
real habit. And again, sugar acts on our brain the same as alcohol. It gives us
Mm,
that, it's an artificial dopamine hit. And the reason I say it's artificial, it's real, but it's not coming from a natural source. So it's not
mm.
coming from walking out in nature, exercising, having a laugh with your mates, you know, being intimate with your partner. You get that natural dopamine hit. We get this artificial dopamine hit, and our our brain is very, very clever at remembering. Very briefly, go back to caveman times. When the caveman was trogging down the road and he saw a raspberry bush and wanted something sweet, they would be able to remember where that was. What happens is your brain does a snapshot of probably 2 or 3 minutes beforehand, or even 5 or 10 minutes beforehand, and it will recognize that regular pattern. So for me, so the caveman would know that raspberries were down there, because he would remember the path eventually,
Yeah.
because it was a habitual thing. Every time he went by, he knew the raspberry bush was there. And that sweet dopamine hit. When I came home from work, or when I finished my work, I would put the key in the car, turn the car, and I wouldn't think about alcohol at all during the daytime, wouldn't even cross my mind. Soon as I got in my car to drive home, there it was. That little whisper in my ear, Carol, you've had a hard day today. You really deserve a drink. And
Yeah.
this would be the conversation in my head, because it knew when I started coming home from work in the car, my brain knew that alcohol was coming, and there was that anticipation of that drink. And that is why it gets so hard when that craving comes as well. You get
Yeah.
that whisper, don't you? You deserve, like you said, you see it as a treat, and people see it as a treat.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because you just made me realise I've got myself into habit because we've got an Easter egg, and every time just before about 12 o'clock, I think, oh, I'm starving. And I go in and have a piece of chocolate. I mean, I am being good, I am rationing myself to one
Yeah.
piece. And then I'm like, I'm still hungry though. So it hasn't really solved it. But it's just that
Mm,
thought of the taste and the texture, and it's really weird, our brains, isn't it? So is there any
yeah.
one tip that you could share at the moment to just help people think about their behavior and how they could possibly help themselves?
Um, I think think awareness is key. Becoming aware of something, because we're on automatic pilot, our brain talks to us all the time. It's just, doesn't it? Yatta, 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 yatta. And
Absolutely, yeah.
we believe everything our thoughts pop in, and we believe everything. Why wouldn't we? It's our brain. But a
Yeah,
lot of the stuff, thoughts are not real. They aren't real until we make them real. It's just a thought that's popped in. And there's a really interesting sequence around for women who crave. Now, this can work through chocolate, can work through anything that's habitual in our behavior that we want to change. That thought pops into our head, like me driving home from work. The thought will pop in, and I'd start entertaining that thought, and I'd start fantasizing about that thought, and I'd be thinking it'd be a nice sunny day outside. Oh, I've got a really nice, Sauvignon Blanc in the fridge, and I can't wait to open it and really sit down and enjoy, a few glasses of wine. We
yeah.
start fantasizing about it. And then what we do, our then logical brain kicks in and says, Carol, you're not drinking. It's not Friday. It's Wednesday today. You're not having a drink. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, but it'd be really nice to have a drink. And then I'd start thinking about the possibility of having a drink. And then that would turn into some excuse to have a drink. But my subconscious had already made its mind up at the fantasizing stage that I was having a drink anyway. So I think
Right.
awareness, to be aware of your thoughts and what you're thinking, is key. And in the early days, I mean, I stopped drinking in October 2019. And in the early days, that craving for me used to come, and I used to have to just distract myself. I would have to go and do something and get away,
Mhm.
because a craving is like a bit of a wave. It only lasts probably 10 minutes, really. You might get lots of them, but they come in like a wave, and you can feel it coming, that craving, and it crests, and you either give in at the top of that crest or you go and do something. And the more we do that, the more we train our brain and rewire those neural pathways to thinking, what's going on? She's not picking up. She's not actually having a drink. And it's rewiring those thought patterns. And I mean, I've got programs, obviously, and there's lots of things out there. There's lots of material and lots of books. If people are interested in looking at books, there's one called Alcohol Explained. I've got it here, actually, by William Porter. And it's a really good book. And I'm a bit sort of technical. I like to understand how my brain works and why I behave in a certain way. And Alcohol Explained is really good. And the book that I stopped drinking with, for those who want to read, is This Naked Mind by Annie Grace.
All right. Yeah.
A fantastic book. So for people that want to try and understand and cut back, as I said, changing your behavior doesn't work. You've got to get to the root of the problem, Nicola. And the
Yeah.
root of the problem is the big fat why. Why do I turn to alcohol? Why do I turn to sugar? Why do I turn to shopping? Why do I turn to gambling? Why do I ... And
So it
until
sounds like
you
you
get...
could actually, sorry to interrupt, but I could say it sounds like you could actually help with a lot more than just alcohol, because you've
Yeah,
obviously
yeah,
researched it thoroughly and
yeah.
know it. And it is very much about the neuroscience of the brain, isn't it?
It is, and it is all about the psychology. And yeah, I'm an integrative coach as well. So I coach people around all sorts of different things. And it's all around mindset. I do emotional change coaching, which is really, a lot of us drink due to unmet needs or emotional issues or stuff that's going on in our lives. And by, as I said, changing our behavior is not the answer. What we need to look at is the reason as to why. So for those listening who want to change, I would get some reading material. I would listen to some podcasts around it. I would jump into some community groups, Facebook groups around Alcohol Explained. William Porter's got one. And once you start educating yourself around alcohol, you start noticing the signs, you start noticing the cravings, the triggers, especially. The trigger for me was walking in the door after I'd finished work. You know, the trigger for some people watching might be a certain night, like a
Mm.
Friday night is a big trigger for a lot of people. It might
Yes,
be a
definitely.
place that you go to or friends that you hang out with. I used to have a friend I used to go after school. I used to go up to her house and she'd always have a glass of wine waiting for me. And I'd got Nathan with me, and Nathan was probably 7 or 8, and she'd got a daughter similar age. So they used to go playing, and I've had a couple of glasses of wine before I went home to start cooking tea and sort the kids out. And inevitably, the thing is, just one thing
Yeah.
as well is our brain, our prefrontal cortex, which is our executive part of our brain. It's like the CEO. That's where our decisions happen. And as soon as we have a drink, that part of our brain is affected straight away. So you
Mm.
have to have some real boundaries around moderation if you can't just have one. Fantastic if you can just have one when you fancy one. But as soon as we drink, that decision capability is clouded. And then you only need somebody to dig you in the ribs and say, "Oh, go on, have another one.
Yeah.
It won't
Have
hurt."
another one. You
And
made
they
me
have
think of a
another.
story there. You made me think of a story there. I had a team manager, and uh, I got up in the morning to go to work, and I picked my phone, I put it on, looked, I'd got a missed call from her at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, what's this all about?
Yeah.
And then I found I'd got an answer machine message, and she'd been arrested,
Oh,
and she'd
no.
been out with her team to drink and have a party to celebrate all their hard work, and she couldn't control her drinking. So there was 2
Mm,
of them left, one of her team members, and she was drinking. Well, the barman refused to serve the fella that she was with because they said he was too drunk,
mm,
and he got a bit stroppy, so they called the police. The police turned up. They were plainclothes police, and they jumped on the fella to hold him down, to take him away. And she saw this and jumped on them, thinking they were just men having a fight. So she ended up arrested and taken down to the police station. And that was why the phone call. At that point in time, she was, I'm terrible. You need to take me off managing. I should never have got myself in this position.
oh,
And she was right to a degree that she shouldn't have got herself in the position.
mm,
But we had a very long conversation the next day. And I'm sure that some managers would have treated it differently from me, but we had a long conversation about the effect that alcohol had on her, and that she needed to understand that she couldn't go out drinking if she couldn't control it with her team, because that just wasn't going to end well. And she
mm,
said, "Oh, take me off management." And I said, "No, I'm going to give you another chance, because I am a firm believer that everybody deserves, one or two chances." And because sometimes it takes us a while to get our head around what we need to do and how to change. Um,
yeah.
and she did. I didn't have any more incidents with her, but she would not drink with her team after that. She got away with a caution. She was very lucky. Um, but a few months down the line, my manager gets in touch with me. Um, that should have been reported to our senior disciplinary people. And I said, well, I dealt with it, and I'd got notes, but they were in her personal file here. And because it was a civil service, they have very strict rules about if you got a
Mm,
police caution for anything. But I felt that you needed to understand what was going on and have that conversation to help her change, because a lot of time people need that opportunity to realize, to reflect, and then think
yeah.
about what they're going to do. And she certainly, from my experience, didn't do it again while I was managing her.
Yeah. It's interesting that, again, that's a societal thing, that to build and bond with your team, you've got to go down the pub, or you've got to
Yeah.
go out where alcohol's concerned, where it's sort of thinking out of the box, do some other team building, go
Exactly.
to, Go Ape or something, or go to, you know, Alton
Go
Towers, or
go bowling, go
yeah,
bowling.
and
I
lots
used
of
to do that with
different
my
things.
team.
Yeah, it's interesting. But we tend to beat ourselves up, Nicola, because we can't control it. And it is addictive in nature. It's very addictive. You
Yeah,
drink it, enough of it for long enough, you will become addicted to it. Now, I'm not saying you'll be full blown drinking in the morning through till night, but you will become addicted to it, because what happens is our brain thinks it needs it for survival. Our primitive part of our brain thinks that we need it because we've been drinking it for long enough. And that's why we have this real difficulty in giving it up, is because it thinks it needs it for survival. And it's a
yeah,
fear-based thing. And I was really scared when I was like, how am I going to live without my alcohol? I've always had alcohol. It's part of me. It's my part of my personality. And like you said about your friend, going out bonding with friends and team members at work, there's a lot of peer pressure to
there is.
say, oh, just have one. But the thing is that decision making up here, you just have one, you get badgered into having another one. Before you know it, you can't remember getting home. So I have lots, I go through a lot of tactics with my clients around preparing for nights out, preparing for events. There's so many things happened. I mean, my daughter got married a couple of years ago, and it's just planning ahead. And I don't, in fact, people think you're going to be boring if you don't drink. I think I've had more interesting conversations with people. I can remember special occasions. I can really listen to other people, because other people love to talk about themselves. We all love to talk about ourselves. And if you're not drinking, going down the pub and maybe having a non-alcoholic drink, or it's a soft drink, and actually engaging in conversation with people. I mean, I've
Mm,
drank for years with people and probably didn't really know that much about them. And I still go down the pub. My husband still goes down the pub. He still goes out on a Friday night with the lads. And I'll pop down, especially in the summer, sit outside and catch up with everybody. And it's just nice to know that I'm in control. I mean, if I wanted to have a drink, I could have a drink if I wanted to. And I reckon I could moderate. But I just don't want to, because I don't want to not be in control. And the thing is, if you can't just have one, you're not in control. And it's really recognizing that, and going back to awareness of, why is it that I need to rely on alcohol? And
yeah,
it's
I
going,
think sometimes it's confidence as well, and people feeling,
yeah,
maybe they're introverted, they struggle with social occasions, and it gives them that confidence. But
yeah,
there are other ways of managing that. So I think it's really good that you've suggested, listening to your podcast, that you've given 2 books, and I think, please put those links in the comments for us, Carol, because
yeah,
I
of
think
course
that's
I
really
will.
useful, and also put how they can contact you as well, because I think
Yeah,
that's
no
really useful.
problem.
Yeah?
Not a problem. And I've got a freebie download as well. If people go to warriormumcoaching.com, that's my handle, Warrior Mum Coaching. You can download a free, it's the 3 biggest mistakes women make when trying to stop drinking. And it's really covers the basics of, what we've chatted about today, and how to plan ahead, because planning ahead is really, really important when you wanted to go out, and change your drinking habits and your behaviours. But yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's been
I
it's
think
been a pleasure.
and I think the why is a really important point as well. So, yeah, you
Yeah.
made me think there about, why do I like chocolate and cakes, and particularly brownies? So, it's all
Yeah,
connected. It's all connected, isn't it?
it works exactly the same on your brain. And just to finish, I gave up sugar for Lent. So on the 14th of February was the first day of Lent, and I decided that this year I was not going to have anything with any refined sugar in at all. No food, no I mean, I'm not a big biscuit thing, but I love cake and I love chocolate.
Yeah.
And my husband on Easter Sunday, I gave my son an Easter egg. I gave my husband a Kit Kat Easter thing, and he bit at some of it and went to give it to me. And do you know what? I had a thought, and I just thought, how have I been feeling without sugar? And I thought, do you know what? My energy levels have been pretty good and they've been pretty stable. I've not had the dips like eating when you eat,
Yeah.
especially if you go out for cake and coffee and it makes you
Yeah.
feel a bit sluggish. It does me. And I've
Yeah.
noticed that. And it made me think, Nicola, and I just thought, do you know what? I don't actually. And I've still not had any. We've just been shopping and I've gone past the chocolate aisle and I've looked at all the goodies and I've just thought, no, I'm not saying I won't have it, but I'm just saying no. And
Good.
every time we do that, we rewiring our thoughts around that thing, and it's just a
Yeah.
matter of building on that over time.
Yeah. I recently wrote a free lead magnet ebook around the neuroscience of influence and persuasion. And again, that talks all about your neurons and rewiring. And it was fascinating because I did a lot of research before I wrote it. And I found it really fascinating. And I suppose as well,
Mm,
also, just to finish off, I did the positive intelligence training, and that was very much about rewiring your saboteurs in your brain. And
yeah,
every time, like you said, every time you have those voices in your head, actually calling them out and saying, look, I know what you're doing, you're trying to make me anxious, and you can pack it in.
yeah,
And actually just saying
yeah,
that quietly aloud or thinking it, and it
yeah.
does help you. So it's the
It has a
same kind
lot
of
of power.
concept.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So on
mine
that
used to have a
note,
name. My alcohol monster used to have a name. I can't remember what name it
yeah.
was, but I gave it a
And
name, and I used to
yeah,
have a conversation with it,
yeah,
verbally have a conversation with it, and I think it's just speaking that out, isn't it? And I think
yeah,
there comes a time where you've got to draw a line in the sand and just think, right, I'm really gonna nail this. It doesn't matter if we fail, because at the end of the day, if we pick up, really, Nicola, it is not our fault. It
yeah,
really isn't our fault, because what's happening is our brain is thinking it's trying to keep us alive because we've been
yeah.
doing it for such a long time. It thinks it needs it. So it isn't our fault that we can't get top side of our drinking. And that's why we've got to just look into research or work with a coach like me, get some accountability, and really get on board as to why you're drinking and just have some more awareness around it.
Absolutely. So I think that was brilliant. Thank you, Carol. That'll be
Hello,
here.
you got there.
Yeah. So finally, so for anybody listening, you can always watch it on replay. If you're watching it on replay and have got any questions, just put hashtag replay and ask the question, and Carol will be in the group and can pick up on it. She'll also
Yeah,
share the links. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Carol, for your
you're
time.
welcome.
Really appreciate
Thank you
it.
for having me. It's really been
That's
good. Thanks, Nicola. Take care.
okay. Take care. You too. Bye.
Bye.